SpaceX versus sovereignty. Inside the Bahamas review of rocket landings. On the morning of April 15, 2025, the government of the Bahamas issued a decision that sent ripples through the global space industry. In a brief but impactful statement, the Bahamian Office of the Prime Minister announced the immediate suspension of all SpaceX rocket landings within Bahamian territorial waters and airspace. The decision, framed as a precautionary regulatory review, followed the debris fallout from a SpaceX Starship test flight that exploded over the Gulf of Mexico, some of which was later discovered near or within Bahamian maritime territory. Though the debris was ultimately deemed non-toxic and not directly connected to the company's Falcon 9 landing program, currently operating under conditional approval. The incident raised new concerns among Bahamian lawmakers, environmental groups, and international law experts regarding how sovereign island nations should handle the increasing pressure from multinational space corporations. This is not the first time SpaceX has found itself navigating complex international waters, literally and figuratively. The company's ambitious plan to routinely land reusable rockets at sea has necessitated partnerships and agreements with coastal nations and the use of autonomous drone ships stationed in international waters. But the Bahamas represents a unique case. A sovereign nation made up of more than 700 islands and cays, the country sits at a strategic geographical crossroads, close to U.S. launch sites in Florida and Texas, with vast, relatively unobstructed stretches of ocean ideal for sea landings. Its proximity to the Gulf Stream makes it a logistical sweet spot for recovering booster stages. SpaceX began exploring arrangements with the Bahamian government as early as 2022, culminating in a conditional authorization of 19 Falcon 9 landings in 2025. The April announcement puts that entire agreement on pause. The decision highlights a broader question about the relationship between state sovereignty and the rapidly evolving commercial space sector. Can a small nation, particularly one whose economy is heavily reliant on tourism and marine biodiversity, afford to place its environmental integrity at risk in the name of space innovation? Conversely, can it afford to miss out on the potential economic benefits, from port fees to technological partnerships, that companies like SpaceX promise? These are the questions now facing Bahamian Prime Minister Philip Davis and his cabinet, who are under pressure from both sides. Environmental advocates who warn of long-term damage to coral reefs and fish habitats, and economic planners who see space as a new frontier for growth and international prestige. The catalyst for this review was SpaceX's April 12th Starship test flight from Boca Chica, Texas. Intended as a fourth high-altitude orbital test, the mission ended in failure when the vehicle broke apart during re-entry. Though Starship flights do not currently include planned splashdowns near the Bahamas, fragments of the disintegrating spacecraft were carried by prevailing winds and ocean currents, eventually washing up in areas near the Bimini and Andros Islands. Initial assessments conducted by the Bahamas Maritime Authority, BMA, in collaboration with international experts found that the debris posed no immediate danger. However, the incident raised alarms about what could happen in the event of a more severe malfunction, or if future landings involved even larger vehicles like Starship. A confidential internal report leaked to local media outlets revealed that senior Bahamian environmental officers had previously expressed concern about SpaceX's increasing reliance on autonomous maritime recovery operations in Bahamian waters. These operations, while technologically efficient, lack the same oversight and public scrutiny as land-based facilities. The concern is not just about physical debris, but also about the acoustic shockwaves and kinetic energy transferred during rocket landings, even at sea. Marine biologists worry that these disturbances could affect dolphin migratory routes, coral reef growth patterns, and even the reproductive cycles of certain fish species native to the region. Public opinion in the Bahamas is sharply divided. Some view the government's pause as a wise and necessary exercise of sovereignty. "We are not just a launch pad for American rockets," said Dr. Kayla Ferguson, marine ecologist and vocal critic of the SpaceX agreement. "Our waters are sacred, and they support the very essence of Bahamian life, from tourism to fishing to our cultural identity. We cannot trade that for the prestige of being part of a billionaire's space fantasy." Her sentiments were echoed by a coalition of environmental NGOs that had petitioned the government for greater transparency regarding the SpaceX arrangement, particularly in relation to how potential accidents or pollution would be managed. Others, however, see the suspension as a missed opportunity. This could have positioned the Bahamas as the Cape Canaveral of the Caribbean, said Henry Mackenzie, a former tourism board member and current space industry consultant. There is enormous potential here, not just in terms of landing zones, but in ancillary services, STEM education partnerships, satellite telemetry stations, and more. This is how small countries can punch above their weight in the 21st century economy. According to Mackenzie, the 19 Falcon 9 landings scheduled for 2025 could have generated up to $18 million in direct revenue, not including indirect boosts to maritime logistics firms, accommodation providers, and even Bahamian universities seeking research partnerships. Caught in the middle of this debate is Prime Minister Davis, who has so far walked a careful line. At a press conference on April 16th, he reiterated that the government's decision was not a condemnation of SpaceX, but rather a procedural necessity to ensure all international agreements adhered to Bahamian environmental and sovereignty standards. "We are proud to be a nation that welcomes innovation and technological partnerships," Davis said, "but we must never allow ourselves to become passive participants in someone else's story. The Bahamas must chart its own course among the stars, guided by the values that sustain our people and protect our environment." SpaceX, for its part, has remained diplomatic. In a brief statement issued the same day, the company said it respects the decision of the Bahamian government and remains committed to transparency, collaboration, and environmental stewardship. The company also expressed hope that ongoing discussions would lead to a resumption of operations. Behind the scenes, however, sources suggest that SpaceX executives are scrambling to reconfigure their launch and landing logistics for upcoming missions. Some contingency plans include redirecting Falcon 9 boosters to other drone ships stationed off the Florida coast, though this could introduce scheduling bottlenecks and increase recovery times. This is not the first time a government has asserted its rights over rocket debris or landing operations. In 2021, the New Zealand government imposed stricter oversight on Rocket Lab's Electron launches from the Mahia Peninsula following local Maori community concerns. Similarly, in 2023, the French overseas territory of French Guiana, home to the European Space Agency's main spaceport, updated its environmental protection laws to reflect new rocket trajectories and impacts. What makes the Bahamas' case unique is its small size, its ecological sensitivity, and its geographic proximity to one of the world's most active space corridors. Legal scholars have pointed out that this situation may soon force a broader conversation about maritime and aerospace governance. International treaties like the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea (UNCLOS) offer only limited guidance on how sovereign nations should handle commercial space activity within their territorial waters. "We are in uncharted legal territory," said Professor Anya Mensah of the University of the West Indies. "There is no clear legal precedent for how an island nation should regulate rocket landings in its exclusive economic zone. The Bahamas may be writing that precedent right now." As the review continues, Bahamian regulators are working closely with a panel of environmental scientists, aerospace engineers, and maritime lawyers to develop a new framework for rocket landings. Among the proposed changes are stricter impact assessments before each mission, mandatory real-time telemetry sharing with Bahamian authorities, and a requirement for environmental remediation funds held in escrow by SpaceX. These recommendations will likely form the basis of a revised regulatory agreement, expected later this year. In the meantime, the SpaceX versus sovereignty saga continues to play out in the court of public opinion, across diplomatic channels, and in technical planning rooms on both sides of the Atlantic. For the Bahamas, it represents more than just a temporary pause in activity. It is a critical test of the country's ability to assert itself in a global industry dominated by powerful actors. For SpaceX, it is a reminder that even the most advanced technology must operate within the boundaries of international law and national dignity. As the world watches, the Bahamas is carving out its own space policy, one that balances innovation with environmentalism, aspiration with caution, and global partnership with national pride. Whether that balance can be maintained in the face of ever-growing space ambitions remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: in the new space age, sovereignty matters just as much as science.